Good morning, class.
Good morning, Miss.
For today's lesson, we'll be looking at weather and climate. Now, before we get into today's topic, let's start off with a little revision of what we would have done last week. Do you remember the topic we covered last week?
Urban development.
What is the topic? Natural and human resources.
Resources and occupation in the community.
Resources and occupations in the community. Now, what can you tell me about some resources we may find in our community? Go ahead. Human resources like what? Doctors and teachers, right? So she did very well. So she gets a prize. Now, who else would like to answer? Go ahead.
Police officers and firemen.
Police officers and firemen. Carpenters. Don't worry, I have enough for everyone. Social workers. Now, let's move on to another question. Who can tell me what is natural resource? Go ahead. Produced by earth and not by man. Very good. Anyone else would like to add to that definition? At the back. Yes. You.
Okay, so a natural resource is anything useful to man, created naturally, not by man.
That's a very good definition.
I was just about to say that.
Don't worry, we have more questions. Who can give me some examples of natural resource? I would like someone who didn't answer yet. You.
Miss diamond minerals.
Diamonds and minerals. What about some other resources we may find in Guyana?
Oh, Miss timber.
Timber. Very good. Alright, so that's a very good wrap on today's revision. Let's look at weather and climate. Now, by the end of this lesson, you would know how to define weather and how to define climate in clear terms. Alright? Now, you will also know how to differentiate between the two. Does anyone in the class know or can tell me in their own terms what the word weather means? Very good. Jonathan, please pass it down. Now, what about climate? Who can tell me what the word climate means? The state of the atmosphere over a long period of time. Thank you. Now, here is what we should know. Who would like to assist me in holding this up? Now, can you read what I have here? What is weather?
What is weather?
Together, please.
Weather describes the condition of the atmosphere over a short period of time. For example, on a daily basis.
Good. So we know weather describes the condition of the atmosphere over a short period of time. So looking at the sky outside, what is the weather like today? It's cloudy. Good. So let's write what we have here. Thank you. Have a seat. Weather describes the conditions of the atmosphere. Yes, you're right, Tim. Weather describes the condition of the atmosphere atmosphere, weather describes the condition of the atmosphere over a short period of time. Weather describes the condition of the atmosphere over a short period of time, comma, for example, today the weather is, today the weather is, and how did we describe the weather today? Cloudy. Very good. Today the weather is cloudy. Now let's move on to our second subheading, defining the term climate. Who can tell me what the word climate means? Someone who did not go yet. The condition of the atmosphere over a long period of time. Is he correct?
Yeah.
Very good. Good. So let's have an example. What is the climate of Guyana like? Like? Our climate is tropical, and when we say our climate is tropical, what are some elements that refers to tropical? I didn't think you went. Hot. What else? What are some other adjectives we can use to describe? One for you and one for me. Anna. It's hot, it's windy, and sometimes it gets cold, right? So the thing about climate, especially in Guyana, depending on what time of year it is, the weather varies. Okay? Yes, we have seasons. That's a good word for it. So let's write. What is climate? Climate describes, continue reading.
Climate describes the condition of the atmosphere over a long period of time. For example, over months or years.
Good. So let's write this. Climate describes the condition of the atmosphere. Climate describes the condition of the atmosphere over a long period of time. Full stop. For example, over months or years. For example, over months or years. Full stop. Now you're going to provide an example. You had a question? What are weather patterns? Weather patterns it's a condition of the atmosphere over a certain time. So, if for example, let's look at Guyana. We have rainy weather, right? And then next day we'll have sun, and then another day we may have what?
Cloudy.
We may have cloudy weather, right? So those are different weather patterns we have here in Guyana. If we're looking at a country like America, what kind of weather patterns you would find there?
Snow,
Snow.
rain,
That's a season, but yes.
mist, sun,
Sun, rain, snow,
haze,
hail. So you have a good example. Those are some examples of weather patterns over different countries. So let's put, for example, over months or years. Hello, class. Now you're going to write your example of climate in Guyana. So let's write in Guyana, the climate is continuing. In Guyana, the climate is, and what is our climate again? Tropical. In Guyana, our climate is tropical. Full stop. Now that we have a very good idea of what weather and climate is, my third question for you, can you differentiate between weather and climate?
yes, miss.
It's fairly simple.
One is a long period, one is a short period.
So, one is for a short period and the other is for a long period.
Yes, miss.
Do you believe so?
Yes, miss.
Good. Let's look at the difference between weather and climate. Can you read for me?
Weather changes regularly every 24 hours, while climate changes after a long time, years.
Okay, let's look at point one. So the first point, they're telling us that weather changes daily, right? For example, over the weekend where I lived, the weather, I woke up and it was raining and it was very cloudy that day. And then the very next day, the sun came out very hot, right? So one day, the day went from being cold to cool, and then the very next day, it was suddenly hot. That is an example of weather. Can you give me an example of weather over a period of time? Who would like to go? Stay here. No one would like to go? It changes over a matter of hours? Yes, that's correct. Because just this morning it was raining where I live and now it's very cloudy. Okay, so that's a change in weather over a few hours.
No, remember like different parts in there, and then like there,
Yes,
rain and so on. So like if your part was raining this morning, then it might still be raining right now.
that's true. So we also have an example that was given that in one part of our country, or let's say Georgetown, for example, in one town it might be raining, but in another part the sun is out hot, and maybe in another part the weather is cloudy. Okay? So that's another example of how weather would change over time within one region or one area of the country. Okay? You ever woke up one day and look at the weather forecast and it says it's going to rain and we're going to have thunderstorms all day. But it's very sunny outside where you live?
Yes.
Good. So that's an example of what the weather is like in one part of the country. We may not experience the same weather. Alright? Let's take a broader example. Maybe in North America. the United States, for example, because the continent is so vast. One region, Florida, we would have hot sunny days. But let's say on the very opposite end of Florida, New York, it may be snowing. All right? So that's another example of how weather changes over time, or it can be very different despite living in the same region. Go ahead. Florida doesn't really experience snow because of its close proximity to the Caribbean. Yes, places, yeah, because we're very close to the equator. So those states that are on the southern end of America, they have more tropical weather. Rarely they have cold. Yes, good. Yes, it's very cold in Alaska because Alaska is very close to the Antarctic. Okay? Any more questions regarding weather?
No, man.
Go ahead. I can't say for Ellie, but that's a question you can go home and look up. All right, class, let's bring ourselves back to focus. Our next subheading, differentiate between weather and climate. You have that down? We have to write weather changes regularly. Weather changes regularly, open brackets, every 24 hours, close brackets. Weather changes regularly, in brackets, every 24 hours, while climate changes after a long time. While climate changes after a long time. Full stop. Sorry, not full stop. Open bracket, years. Then full stop. Weather changes regularly every 24 hours, while climate changes after a long time, in brackets, years. Now, can you provide me with an example of how climate changes? Move back to the front. Yes, you. Answer my question. Provide the class with an example of how climate changes over time. Stand and answer, because you carry on your own conversation at the back of the classroom. You don't know? You're going to remain standing until you can give me an example. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. An example is that if it like rain for 6 months, it will be hot.
No. No, that's an example of season. And season falls under how weather changes. Okay? Now, when we're looking at climate, we're looking over a period of years, not months. But it was a very good try. Go ahead.
It's like the ice age.
The Ice Age. So, do you think that's an example of how climate changes over time? For millions of years, it was cold, right? The land was cold and barren. And then over time, what happened? It got warmer. And what happened when the earth started to become warm? The ice began to melt. Yes, global warming just does factor in. Can you give us an example of climate? How climate changes over time. Next time I catch you talking, go ahead. Drought? Yes. So for some period of time, many countries experience long years of dry weather. For example, in the desert. Yes, that is an example of the way climate changes over time, right? So, so for example, if we're looking at the Sahara Desert, the climate it's dry, right? The land it's dry, it's hot. There rarely is any change in climate over time. Maybe the biggest change that would happen is that we get rain, but that's weather, right? So
Yes.
not 2 times a month. There's a in the Sahara. Go ahead.
Service. But like I think like I'm not saying that this will happen, but like let's say there are some time and it's very sunny and one day we just experience snow. Like literally.
That would be disastrous for us as we're very close to the equator. We should not be experiencing slow.
No man.
But that is an example of climate change, right? Place now slowly some places that experience very cold weather. It's suddenly very hot year round. That's an example of how climate change is affecting us today.
This is not a question. Like how Guyana is in the tropical zone. How many other zones are there?
So
The Middle East.
who knows this? Ariel?
This tropical Capricorn,
Mm-hmm.
tropical Cancer, the tropical Capricorn, tropical Cancer.
Tropic of Capricorn, Tropic of Cancer. You know the other
This
two?
one is going from north to south. Let's see.
All right, so we're straying away from the topic. What you can do if you're very interested in it. That's not your question?
No, miss like the polar and frigid
Miss.
zone,
Miss,
tropical or torrid zone.
Yes.
How many other zones are there?
Miss,
Miss, there's four.
Temperate zone, tropic zone, frigid zone, arctic
Good.
zone.
So, all right, your classmates answered your question for you. But if that is something that you're very interested in, you can go home, do additional research, and come back and present to the class.
Again, miss?
Well, we've strayed off topic, so let's come back. Let's move on to point 2. Let's look at our second difference. Read.
Climate covers a larger area than weather.
Climate covers a larger area than weather. So, how can we break down that point? Climate covers a larger area than weather. You wrote that? Write that. Nilay? You had your hand up.
Yeah, Miss, like this one transit.
Go ahead.
Miss, for say for weather could only affect like a certain part of the country, like region. But for climate, it affects the whole country.
So climate affects the whole country, right? We're living in a tropical climate, but from a day to day, different parts of that region will experience different types of weather. So he is correct. Very good.
Miss, but since the equator runs through Brazil, does that mean I'm getting different climate, or is it because they're closer to the
Different climate.
It's because the equator technically runs through Brazil.
Mm-hmm.
So this I'm wondering.
It still experiences the same climate, tropical climate, but Brazil is very vast, right? So it's also very close to the Antarctica, right? So different parts of Brazil would
So once I
experience
get
different
snow
kinds
on
of
the
weather.
I don't think Brazil.
But I don't think he's right. Maybe parts of Argentina and Chile
It's like
does.
low.
You have to be very low. Go ahead. You had a question?
Yes.
All right, think about your question. Let's move on to the very last activity that we have today. And then we'll end with a little recap of what we learned today. So let's head up. Activity number one. Write a letter. Write a letter to a friend living abroad. Write a letter to a friend living abroad, responding to his responding to a previous letter he sent, responding to a previous letter he sent, he or she, responding to a letter he or she sent about a snowstorm, about a snowstorm their city is currently experiencing. About a snowstorm their city is currently experiencing. Now, in this letter, the things that can help you, you can write, you can try to show empathy for their situation. Maybe try to discuss what the weather and climate is like that you're living. Say that maybe next year on your summer vacation you can come to Guyana and you could experience some hot weather as opposed to what you're experiencing now. So you're writing a letter to show what the weather is like for you usually. Do you understand what you have to do? All right, begin. Now you remember the format of the letter, right? Good. Let's start. One at a time. No, we don't really have deserts for that, nor the high winds. Diana, you had a question? Guyana. You're living in Guyana, but they're living in a country that's currently experiencing a snowstorm. Now, now I expect you to use the correct format of the letter. If are you supposed to indent? Practice the way that your teacher taught you in English. You said you're currently doing letter writing. You did it. Come around. Mhm. Informal because you're writing to a friend. Go ahead. You want to use your English able for your letter format? Go ahead. I'm going to give you a few minutes to get started and I'm going to come around to check. ahead. How many paragraphs?
One.
You should have at least three: an introduction, and then a body, and then a concluding paragraph. You have to properly write, right? You're writing a letter. So three paragraphs, please. When you're writing this letter, of course, because it's your friend, you have to talk about, ask him how he's doing, and then go on. Make it flow. Go ahead. Can I ask how many of you are finished with the coursework? Everyone is finished? Then you have to submit today.
This was the last course.
The map that we did last week. Are you finished with the first one? Good. hmm Remember, write your letter. Write your letter. Not the map of Guyana. The coursework that we did last week. The community that. Make sure it's pasted in your books. You're going to open TV. I'll talk a little bit about what the weather is like in Guyana. I mean, would you like them to come visit? Do they want to change the climate? You're finished? Jada? Jada? Wake her up. Please lift your head off the table. You have work to be done. Yes. You have to write it as if you were responding to the letter. That is the instruction. I'm going to give you 5 more minutes to wrap up. You want to go out for break, right?
Yes, miss.
Good. So it's a very simple letter to write. I'm not asking for a very long one-page letter. Think about it as if you're chatting with your friend, right? You find out what they're doing, how they are, maybe how their family are in the introduction of the letter.
When I chat with my friends, they always talk so English.
Well, you have to practice. Then, in the body of the letter, you discuss the contents of your previous letter, right? What he said to you about how terrible this snowstorm is, right? How it's very cold and maybe they have power outage, and you could empathize with them, right? And maybe try to relate to them. Talk about how that or maybe that you don't experience this type of weather but you know what blackouts feel like because you're living in Guyana. Yes. You have questions at the back?
You said you could write
I said you think about it as if you're chatting with your friend. It's an informal letter, yes. If you would like to write Creolese, then go ahead. What is? What is it? Never heard of that. All right, and just little things for you to discuss in the body of your letter. And then in your concluding paragraph, well, you know how to wrap up your letter. That's up to you. And then you sign it, your friend sincerely, etc., and put your name. All right? Someone's finished? No. Just make sure it's very well done because I will be marking them. All right? Look over for spelling mistakes. I know how to read cursive. No, it's not going for marks. I only have one coursework piece to collect, and that's what we did last week. But you still, even though it's not going for marks, you still have to do everything to the best of your abilities. Pull that up. Finish off your list. Hold on. Is anyone struggling? They would like some help? Come. She's sick?
She doesn't.
She's saying she doesn't need help. Alright, it seems to me as if you're finished. So let's begin wrapping up. Now, what's one thing you can tell me that you learned today in class? This?
The difference is climate.
You learned what is climate? What else?
The difference between climate
You now know the difference between weather and climate. Anyone else? You learned about weather patterns. Is Nayasia here? Alright. So do you have any other facts that you learned from today's lesson? We covered that. Go ahead.
I learned how to write.
You told us about that, but okay, the class did learn something there.
I learned that land covers a large area.
Okay, so you now know how to define climate. Alright, so that signals the end of the lesson. Just kindly pass your books to the front and you can be excused to break. Just close them.